Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session entitled Truth, Not Tricks, focused on AI-driven disinformation. That is content that is deliberately created and spread to deceive people, to secure economic and political gain, and to cause public harm. AI-driven disinformation is mainstream media today. It is out there weaponizing our words, our pictures, our images, our voice recording, even our animations. In fact, it comes in all forms of content and is available on all channels. This is a serious subject, and we've got some serious expert speakers lined up to address the subject here at ChangeNOW. In just a few minutes, I'm going to be discussing with Dr. Cecilia Rikap and Christophe, Jakubyszyn, editor-in-chief of Les Echos. After that, I'll be calling up on stage Luísa, Franco, Machado, I beg your pardon, Machado, and we're going to be talking about democratic resilience. But first, to set the stage for us, we have an opening keynote address entitled Fake News is Old News, a brief reflection on information and power. Please welcome Director of European AI Governance at the Future Society, Toni Lorente.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm here from the Future Society, an independent non-profit organization established a decade ago that today focuses on a mission to align AI through better governance. I'm honored to be here with other incredible speakers whom I also know spend their days thinking about the impact of AI and what lies ahead in our future, given we currently stand at a crossroads with tremendous technological innovation and societal transformation. When I was preparing this keynote, I found myself asking three questions over and over. First, how do the latest technological advancements shape disinformation? Second, how does AI-driven disinformation affect the redistribution of political power? And third, what's left for us to do? While I will not attempt to answer all of these questions in depth, that would be crazy, I hope that a superficial scratch suffices to spark the conversation. Before I start, though, I wanted to share a brief historical note to put into perspective what we will be discussing here in the next hour or so. It is tempting to think that fake news and disinformation are relatively new practices. It is harder and harder to remember life before social media. Disinformation campaigns and the use of dubious facts to shape public opinion, however, are as old as political organization itself. Going back to what many consider perhaps not the cradle, but the kindergarten of modern politics, Rome, we can see a token of how disinformation is an integral part of modern politics. Sparing you the nitty-gritty details of Roman politics, Octavian launched a campaign to discredit Mark Antony, leveraging a document that allegedly was his will and testament. Octavian's propaganda campaign against Antony leveraged short and sharp slogans worthy of tweets, painting Antony as a womanizer, a drunk, corrupted by his affair with Cleopatra, and being Cleopatra's puppet. The result? Octavian became the first Roman emperor. This historical beat, however, is not an outlier. As our history attests, fake news and disinformation campaigns are endemic to political dynamics. From Roman power struggles to World War propaganda or current-time Twitter campaigns, the intersection of falseness and intent to deceive has been a sharp tool, always ready to score. Many of you in this room have surely been thinking about the issues we'll be talking about today. However, I would like to lay out a few relevant pieces on how I believe late technological advancements have shaped disinformation. The mass adoption of social media and the increased connectivity through access to broadband internet and portable devices like smartphones has triggered a shift in power balance around narrative control and information reach. Media has traditionally been considered to be the fourth estate or the fourth power. However, and with an ever-increasing use of social media to share and access information, this reality is being put into question. The fact that 17% of adults in the US often get their news from TikTok is not the alarming part. The alarming part is that since 2020, there's been a six-fold increase in that share. It is widely acknowledged that traditional media has its own limitations and problems. However, there is a qualitative difference between professional reporting and content generation. And this difference has direct consequences on information generation and consumption patterns. From a well-researched piece that's usually contrasted and has been checked by professional fact-checkers, to a high-paced, highly emotional slogan to convey punchy messages without too much detail. As a result, the nature of the information that is being shared and consumed is changing as the distribution channels change as well. More information results in more competition, more options. Information bits are thus compressed to 100 and so characters, to 10-second videos, to a handful of pictures, and with these, as research shows, our attention spans also decrease. This has a direct effect on how deep one is willing to go to contrast a fact. However, it also has a parallel effect on how people are defining their goals and aspirations. More and more career surveys today show that not only children, but also adults want to be content creators or influencers. The sociological implications of these are various, from a decrease in signal-to-noise ratio in current digital environments, to a more lax approach to truth and facts. Tailor-made feeds are bolstering echo chambers in unprecedented ways. But the scale of the problem is made apparent when we look at the numbers. 94.2% of the world's internet currently now use social media every month. That is roughly 5.24 billion people in the world. Moreover, 7.21 billion people, that is around 90% of the population, own a smartphone. An average screen time north of 4 hours is common, and this figure only increases when age decreases. We are in fact more connected than ever, but to what? In a context where human connection and even value creation are digitally mediated and open to any, disinformation finds its perfect environment to thrive. In a way, this is the new liberal epitome. Social media provides a platform to harness one's own life, work, or hobbies into potential sources of income, while polluting the environment, both literally and figuratively, for the sake of feeding the infinite scroll. And this is where AI comes into play. More capable models can take hundreds, if not thousands, of variables into account to infer value and recommend better content to you. Yet the proxy for value here is engagement, and the truth is that our somewhat primitive brain tends to prefer yet another cooking video over an opinion piece on some historical topic that's rather complex. As Kara Swisher put it, more and more people across the globe get their news and cues from social media. It has a scary ability to generate anxiety and rage, and it is addictive. In her research, she spoke to a handful of experts, and she said that they all came to the same conclusion. In the new paradigm, engagement equals enragement. This is why information, oftentimes costly to access and to process, can lose by a landslide when put face-to-face against loud headlines. The second question I mentioned is how are these new technological developments affecting and redistributing political power? The crisis of the fourth power is not leaving a power void. On the contrary, social media platforms are channeling some of it. Understanding social media as platforms to disseminate and access information, AI-driven mediation is increasingly playing an important role. From the presidential elections in Romania, which had to be called off due to external influence, to Twitter and Facebook's steer towards minimal to no content moderation, the interplay of privately owned platforms and political interests of various types is reshaping contemporary politics. Far-right movements gaining traction all over the world, with populist mottos at the core, make great material for tweet-like messages or eye-catching headlines that trigger an emotional reaction. And kid you not, disinformation campaigns are deliberate and sophisticated. And even though many of the components of social media, like participation or representation, are intrinsic to our democracies, privately owned and controlled spaces like social media can be hugely manipulated. In this context, it's becoming easier than ever to buy advertising, to use content farms, and AI to accelerate disinformation campaigns. But power redistribution is not only occurring in a traditional understanding of politics. Take the general purpose AI industry, for example. One of the key attributes of companies developing general purpose AI, or foundation models as they call them, is a moat around information. There's a brutal information asymmetry when it comes to the key features about their tech stack. In this regard, the complexity of the technical object, AI, together with considerable entry barriers in terms of capital or infrastructure, make it difficult to challenge the technology itself. Yes, there is a black box, but the problem is that the black box is sitting in a black room with no windows for other stakeholders to pick. Regulators, and EU regulators in particular, have been confronted with this reality. When big tech companies, for example, claim that a certain piece of regulation is too burdensome or too anti-innovation, the baseline for anyone else to assess this claim is a lack of information about what big tech is doing and a lack of knowledge about how costly it is to do so. And even if that does not amount to disinformation by itself, the impossibility to contrast facts together with a feeling that the AI revolution is coming pushes policy conversations toward narratives that may or may not be grounded in facts. Moreover, this example is particularly interesting because this type of asymmetry fosters AI capabilities that are not being oversight. In turn, more powerful AI lowers the barriers to generate or fabricate plausible, albeit false, information. Here, I want to draw the attention to the difference between AI-mediated and AI-generated disinformation. On the one hand, AI mediation is relevant because it determines who accesses what content. I was recently in a presentation where the speaker posed a hypothesis that AI-driven content moderation was preventing grassroots movements. My first instinct was to ask, well, but when has content moderation, broadly understood, ever favored grassroots movements? The key point here is that while AI is augmenting some of the problems related to information and power, these problems are not intrinsic to AI, but to the interplay between political power and information flows. However, AI-mediated content is rooted in a paradigm where algorithms favor engagement or enragement over veracity or closeness to ground truth, triggering in turn an epistemological shift where the very importance of facts is brought into question. This has effects beyond fake news and disinformation itself, but onto our very relationship to facts and information in general. On the other hand, AI-generated information is problematic for a number of reasons. We're all exposed to the AI slop that's clogging our networks. And in a world where AI is being thrown into every product and service, a critical eye is, if anything, more important than ever. LLMs and chatbots are great at providing plausible outputs and responses that do not necessarily reflect the ground truth or that are not rooted in facts. Because of the probabilistic nature of these models, at least in their current form, they are great at looking right, not so much in being right. And while it is true that certain enhancement techniques can improve the quality of the information these models produce, that is not a silver bullet. For example, search-augmented systems prioritize recent information. And while this opens up the possibility for these systems to remain accurate, it also enhances the possibility for fabricated facts to be more easily leveraged. In short, as models become more connected to real-time information, they can be more easily manipulated. In this regard, the path from the rather rudimentary talk of the town sharing of information through printed press, search engines, social media, and ultimately LLMs is one of expansion in terms of reach and scope, but at the same time, it's one of narrowing in terms of diversity of views. This paradox has profound implications on the type of information we have access to, but also on the process to get that information. It affords access to virtually all information available, yet this is more and more narrowly delivered. In automating the process of search, evaluation, and information curation, the nuance that comes with just doing it is also lost. This is more and more important as the outputs of AI models become more plausible and complex. The path from amateur deepfakes with 6 fingers to completely realistic videos has been a short one. And projecting that path onto the future, even if we take a conservative linear trend, raises deeper questions for our democracies. We've failed to address the challenge of disinformation and its very real life consequences. And now AI is supercharging the issue. So what is left for us to do? One question we can ask ourselves, regardless of whether you are a business owner, a researcher, procuring an AI product or service, or an end user, is what are we handing over when we incorporate AI into our lives and our pipelines? This question is not by any means intended to deter AI adoption. On the contrary, I believe asking this question can actually foster responsible and valuable applications of AI. But in the same way one would not use a pan to drive a nail through the wall, even if one could do that, seeking information through probabilistic models or letting social media feeds be the chisel to shape our worldviews entails a purpose drift with dire consequences. And when we use AI to write our emails, our briefs, reports, messages, we renounce what comes with it. One could say search engines already did that in a way, and I would agree with that. But we're quickly moving towards a future where diversity and different opinions are being computed as costs. We have more options than ever in all senses, yet we outsource the choosing to algorithms, even when we know questions hardly ever have a single answer. So I refuse to believe that the cost of handing over to AI our pursuit of information, learning processes, our jobs, our social relationships can be boiled down or captured in purely economic terms, be it a fee, productivity gains, or access to new services. When you rely on a tool to do part of your job, it is not just the task that is being outsourced, but also some of the thought processes it entails. Social media, as a means to access information, decreases the diversity of views that you can be potentially exposed to. LLMs, as tools to write emails or text, reduce the chance of individual expression and long-term learning through that. AI summaries of books eliminate the pleasure and growth that comes with just reading them. We all live in a constant tension between this growth mindset and doing more things versus a mindset of let's get things done. And we're naturally drawn to the least resistance path. But it is exactly because of this that the tools to combat disinformation fundamentally lie in our own choices. The antidote to disinformation is critical thinking and actions that reflect that critical thinking. Otherwise, we may end up in a world where the cost of convenience is the impossibility to tell facts from lies. And that's a scary prospect, if you ask me. So it's important that we have discussions like this, like the one we're going to have today, and each of us consider the role we can play in steering towards a better direction. The challenge of AI-driven disinformation encompasses a range of tough problems, and we need to figure out how to take action together. I know we'll be getting more food for thought shortly from our brilliant speakers, which will help us explore this issue further. Thank you very much, and please feel free to reach out.
Good luck. Thank you. Thank you so much to Toni Lorente from the Future Society for warming us up here, setting the stage for our next panel, which is how AI is being used to fuel disinformation campaigns. Let's meet our next speakers. Please welcome on stage Dr. Cecilia Rikap and Christophe Jakubyszyn. Come on up here on stage. Thank you. Cecilia, Christophe, welcome to ChangeNOW. It's great to have you here on stage.
Great to be here.
So, Cecilia Rikap, you are Associate Professor in Economics at University College London and Head of Research at UCLA's Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. Christophe, welcome. You are the editor-in-chief at France's leading financial newspaper, Les Echos. It's great to have you both here on stage with us. Now, just to get us started on this conversation of disinformation campaigns, let me give you an example of a recent disinformation campaign that happened right here in France. NewsGuard, which is a global leader in information reality, recently published and found that Storm 1516, which is a Russian influence operation, targeted France for 4 months between December 2024, March 2025, with 5 different false narratives. During that time, that campaign spread, I'm going to get my numbers right here, was spread in 38,877 social media posts and was viewed and generated 55.8 million views. That's the context that we are dealing with. If that's not serious enough, NewsGuard analysts also found that chatbots were being used to propagate that even further. So we have with us now Christophe, editor-in-chief, who is an expert in the content. We're going to be diving into the generative AI being used to generate this content, and Cecilia here very much in terms of the propagation, but also moderation. So Christophe, editor-in-chief, content is your expertise. Can you share with us your insights and your perspectives on generative AI being used today to create video, image, text disinformation?
Well, it's true that social media was probably a storm a few years ago, but today generative AI is a hurricane. I mean, I think the impact on historical media of AI is even higher than it was with the social media, because social media was a world of opinions, but all opinions were legitimate, and the role of the legacy media at that time was to prove the readers, our subscribers, that they were facts and opinions, and that we should and we have to defend fact toward opinions. But now it's even more complicated, because generative AI can create parallel world, not only of opinions, but also of false facts. As you just said earlier, and people are so used to be informed with social media that now they are informed with social media augmented by generative AI. And as you know, it's for 10 or 15 years, people are used to live in communities of common thought and common sensibilities, and that's for a long time. We're used to that, but now in those worlds, you can create completely parallel world and parallel fact and parallel universe, and it's even harder for us. But on the other hand, I think it's probably an opportunity for us to. I think it's maybe even more easier compared to social media 1.0. I think it's easier to show and to prove our legacy and our credibility of fact-checking and rationality, science, toward social media 2.0, which is a complete. I mean, it's not only opinions; it's also opinion from machine, from computers, even opinion. Of course, as he said earlier, the political intrication with the generative AI is stronger now. It's stronger even since the Trump access to power at the White House and the coalition between GAFAM, CEO, and White House occupant. You can also, of course, manipulate this AI, but the AI can also manipulate anyone. I think the difference between computing and AI, especially generative AI, is that AI, I don't know if AI will have its own consciousness one day. I was very lucky, a few years ago, to talk with Yves Coppens, the anthropologue, and sorry, it's only 30 seconds, but it's very interesting. And I asked him, when do you think human became human? When do you think human had the capacity of knowing he's a human and he can think? And he said, well, I thought about that all my life, and now I've got a certitude, a conviction that it's only quantity. When man came from 4 legs to 2 legs,
Okay.
and when the brain started to grow, then the number of operations in the brain became sufficient enough to get the perception of himself. And he said, I think computer will have this perception one day, and they will be able to be conscious of themselves. And I think we are here now. I think the generative AI, it's not a O1 operation. It's the reproduction of human brain and human network of neuron. So I think we are here, maybe not just now, maybe tomorrow. So I think it's, opinion, social media, and a new elephant in the room, which is a computer, which is a generative AI, computing capacity. We don't know how far this capacity will go. And so I'm very worried, yes.
I can understand that. So you've given us the context of today, but also maybe a little look into tomorrow. I thought it was interesting when you said about sort of opinions and then facts, because yes, effectively we should all be able to have our opinions. That's part of democracy today. But the role of media and news media is to have that fact here. And that's where we see generative AI sort of, let's say, playing more of a risk, because it's also not just affecting us in the future, but historically, we see the historic narratives being changed. So we've addressed things a little bit there from a content perspective, maybe. Cecilia, I want to come across to you and talk about from a sort of distribution perspective. What is your take on today, where we are? What are your thoughts on perspectives and perspectives on the context of how generative AI is being used to distribute, spread, and moderate the content we see out there?
So, hi everyone. Let me start by asking ourselves one question, which is why? Why is this the technology that we are getting? Why this AI? Couldn't we be developing a different AI? Who is producing this AI that we are getting, and this AI that is contributing to an escalation of disinformation that we've never even thought that could exist? So AI, as much as we think that it's autonomous or can be neutral, is neither one nor the other. AI, as every technology, is produced by organizations. In particular, in the case of AI, is produced by a few companies. These companies are based in the US and China, but at the same time, they operate globally. Toni was referring before to them as big tech, GAFAM. We can put different names to these companies, but large leading corporations in the tech sector have a capacity to control the whole AI value chain, from how research is conducted. So even if all our countries have thousands of people working on developing the ideas and thinking about AI models, the questions that they ask, the way in which they answer those questions, how the models are developed, what data is used for training, the fact that the people that are curating the data that is used for training are casualized workers, precarious workers based in general, mostly in the peripheral countries. All these are economic and political decisions that are being made, even if we don't even realize that all this is happening behind what seems to be just the new hype or a new technology. And as long as we don't understand the depth of this value chain, the complexities, we will still be living in a world where we think that AI is magical and that tomorrow we will wake up and we will see robots walking next to us. And that's not the threat. The threat is that our society, the decisions, key decisions in our society, are being made by a few corporations. Because the technologies that we get are the technologies that they want, that serve the purposes of companies. And this is serious, because when we move, for instance, specifically to the realm of media, what we are seeing is that the decisions in terms of what algorithms will be used to curate what appears first, what is amplified in the threads, and what is left behind, what is completely silent, is not a decision based on a clear, outspoken, and transparent editorial line that we may like or not, but at least we know who is speaking or from where those journalists are speaking from. That's not the way it happens. What it happens is that the algorithms in social media, and the same happens with algorithms used wide and large in our society, are developed in a conscious way to make us stay there longer. So we stay in social media, we pay more attention to social media, and these, of course, may not result in a type of algorithm that privileges the good of our society and spreading fact-check truths, or at least doesn't contribute to spreading misinformation. This has resulted actually in algorithms that, because the aim, again, is to capture more data from us, to have us inside the apps so that we are consuming more ads in the case of social media and social networks, the result is basically a massive spread of misinformation. So if we really want to change this, we really need to go to the depth of how the technologies are being produced. And again, it's not simply that because we have a lot of people producing it, it will be more democratic, because those making the decisions are just a few. And those making the decisions are also controlling not only what type of AI we get, but they also harvest most of the profits. So they get richer and richer, while most of us become their data subjects.
Well, certainly, and the business model of all of this is something that I know that Luísa is going to be talking about just after this as well. You were very much honed in on social media there for distribution of this disinformation, but we know that that's not the only way that it's being put out there today. We also see that it's being put out there and spread through platforms beyond social media. Okay, and that's one of the ways we need to combat and address this. Also, that's also what NewsGuard picked up on. Quick question to our audience out here, actually. Let's do a quick poll here. Put your hands up if you feel that you believe that you may have been targeted by a disinformation campaign already, or seen disinformation out there. Okay, so I'd say that's probably about 40% of our audience. The other 60%, you've probably also been targeted, okay? You're just not aware of it yet. So listen in, you're going to learn more on this. We're starting to become more aware of this issue and how serious an issue it is, both in our content, but how we're being targeted and fed this information, and why, the economic gains that are there for it. I want us now to sort of think a little bit about how do we respond and react to this. Christophe, I'm going to come to you first. How is Les Echos and how can the media be responding to this threat?
Well, we have to ensure that the universe, our model is protected from outside influence. And we are very lucky because as a specialized newspaper, we have a community of subscribers. They pay quite a lot of money to be able to read them, to read us. And so we really have to, you said earlier that the data is, of course, the strategic food of the AI, of the generative AI. And we want to keep our data, so there is two ways of doing that. First is to ensure that GAFAM are not stealing it, and they do a lot, so we have a lot of trial with them. And then second, because AI is also an ally, it's a tool for us, and we are using this tool. It's on the same way an ally and a tool we have to use for ourselves and to out of our data to make useful services for our readers, but it's also a competitor. And to be sure that in the competition, it will be a fair one. First, we have to protect ourselves, and then we have to use AI, because everyone is going to use AI agent or generative AI to get information. But we want this agent or this generative AI to use our data. and the contract I can do with my readers and with my subscribers is that all the information they will get from the AI will use secure data, will use data from the work of the journalists of Les Echos. So the idea is to, I mean, you can go toward history. I mean, history is, I go home and I will ask my agent to give me information about companies, about markets. I probably won't open print newspaper. It's not the way I will be informed. So I will be informed by my agent. But me at Les Echos, I want a contract with my subscriber that his agent or her agent will use my data. That's the way I want to secure and to make a Chinese wall between, as we said earlier, opinion and fact, and also fact from the real world and fact from the parallel worlds of the generative AI. That's one of the ideas.
I loved what you were saying there about the contract and the trust and the service that goes on there. Because one of the things that strikes me is that AI is now so prevalent and we're using it all, but because they've made it available for free. Okay, there's sort of a hooked us in with that. But I think moving forwards, where it comes to our data or the quality of data that we are receiving, it will come down to a trusted service agreement as such. Cecilia, I want to talk about, and I want to come to you and your expertise and your experience in how AI is being used as a tool to help us actually evolve and create the policies and practices we need to strengthen us in the context today with this disinformation. What do you see is being done and you believe needs to be done?
So let me first briefly follow up on what Christophe was saying. I think that there are three key questions that everyone should be asking themselves when thinking about adopting AI. If you're thinking about using AI either as an individual or as an organization, question one, by using this AI model, will I become or my organization become dependent for now and ever to a technology that I don't know how it works, that it's a black box to me as well as to regulators, and that it's a black box for something that is at the core of what I'm doing. Because of course, I don't need to know everything about every single piece of technology that I'm using. But if it's becoming the core of my work, if it's at the center of my way of living, I need to at least understand how it works, what type of data is harvesting from me, how it was developed, who is being favored out of my use of this technology, and whether there are alternatives, how easy it is for me to move to another alternative. So question one, degree of dependency. Question two, are there alternative ways? With all this hype, we forget that many of the things that are being done with AI could be done with other technologies, could be done in different ways that are way less resource intensive. A lot of the panels here these days speak about the ecological crisis. AI consumes massive amounts of energy, water, other resources. It's not a battle against AI, but we should definitely think about AI for what, for whom, how. So second, are there alternatives that work as well, that work perhaps not as well, but good enough, and that at the same time are more cautious of the planetary boundaries? Question number three, to what extent using AI is diminishing our capacity to think autonomously, our capacity to develop critical thinking? And it's not just the outcome of my own research. I will cite two other pieces of research about this. One comes from the MIT. It's a survey on the scholars using AI for material discovery. 82% of the scholars using it declared that they feel unsatisfied with their work because of a skill underutilization. The other piece of research comes, surprisingly, from Microsoft. Microsoft itself saying that the use of generative AI diminishes critical thinking, that the people that are more confident on the results of generative AI progressively lose their capacity to think critically. And if we are living in a world where more than ever the technologies that we get are influenced by political and economic decisions, we cannot afford ourselves to lose that critical thinking. So certainly, I think that before giving you a full list of, okay, this is a good use, and then you can go and say to friends, no, AI is bad for this and this use in the media, but it's good for these other things. I think that everyone should rehearse your own answers to these questions when thinking about adopting AI. A use of AI that is not undermining the people using it, and that I just want to bring as an example for your question, Kristen, is how competition and market authorities are attempting to use AI, among others, to screen the tons of information that they request from these companies when they are trying to put them on trial. One of the ways in which these companies, on purpose, of course, contribute to delays in the trials is by giving them tons and tons of emails and things that make no sense, so that it takes a lot of time to the regulators to really identify where the relevant information is. So AI is used not to replace the lawyers, not to replace the people doing the analysis, but to help them screen all that faster. So again, I think that we need to think about how AI can empower the journalists, empower the researchers, empower the designers, the software engineers, but always being careful that it's not at the expense of our capacity to think critically.
Definitely. Critical thinking. There are a number of studies and research out there now that are showing that it's having an effect for us. And you mentioned briefly there the environmental impact as well. I'm going to do a shout out to the session we did yesterday with Axel Lemaire and James Martin. Watch that if you want to see more information on that. So critical thinking is something we need to be aware of. Now, critically, I'm looking at the clock here. We have 4 minutes left. This is a solutions-focused event we're at here today. You're both experts in your fields. So I propose that we dedicate the couple of minutes we have remaining to having from each of you give examples of AI being used to strengthen media, strengthen journalists, strengthen our societies, our citizens against disinformation. What should we be looking at? What should we be looking out for that's coming down the pipe? Stuff.
I will say everything has a cost. As Cecilia said, when you're using new AI, first, if it's free, it's someone is stealing something from you or from the planet. From you, it's your data, and from the planet is all the energy needed to have answer from generative AI. As a media, I have a dream, and it's a dream that some of my readers or subscribers told me. They want to use the modern tools. They want to use agent. They want to use AI, but they want to pay for the data they get, and they want to pay for the information they get. So they need a cooperation between media and new tools, not new computing tools, new generative AI tools, but this has a price, this has a value, and I think we should look forward to find the cooperation between the two universe. And what Cecilia said is, of course, very relevant. I think it's so powerful and it's so completely, technically complicated what we are living today. We should stay aware. We should stay aware of who is producing it, from which company, from which country, from which political power and government. So we should be strong in this war and in this fight, and we should stand by ourselves.
Thank you, Christophe. Just thinking of that phrase that it never gets old. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, Cecilia.
Sure. I will first say that for those of you who want to get a full flavor of the proposals that I have in my mind, together with many colleagues, we've written a report that is called Reclaiming Digital Sovereignty. It's on the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose website. So now I will just focus on one thing inside that report that refers to our discussion today, which is about social media, social networks, and how they could work differently, what type of AI we need for these spaces. Of course, we need better moderation, but moderation is not enough. Moderation is ex post. So to be sure that we get algorithms designed in a way that it's democratic, designed in a way that they will not be promoting just people to stay there in the apps, but actually democratizing the access to fact-check information, I think that we need a public solution. We already have it with the legacy media, the BBC in the UK where I live, here as well, in Argentina where I originally come from. We have public media. We also need public social media, public social networks, and they should be governed in a way that it operates as an international commons, that operates democratically. Of course, we cannot leave this type of media in the hands of one specific government, especially these days. I said that I come from Argentina. My country now has a far-right, anti-state and anti-public government. I'm not thinking about giving to Javier Milei a social media or social network. I'm thinking about how collectively we can envision, we can create new governing bodies that for the public and funded by the public sector actually offer us a different type of information in the age of AI.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our subject is disinformation. You've heard only facts from our speakers here today. Thank you so much to Christophe. Thank you so much to Cecilia. Thank you. We've heard plenty about the threat and the impacts of AI-driven disinformation and how it's being used to undermine us, undermine our societies, undermine our democracy. Our next guest has plenty of thoughts about how we can strengthen ourselves, strengthen our societies, and in fact also increase our democratic resilience in the face of this threat. Please welcome here to ChangeNOW, Luísa, Franco, Machado. Luísa. Welcome to ChangeNOW. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thanks, everyone, for being here today.
OK, so let me introduce you properly, because there's a lot that you've got going on in your life here. So, Luísa, you're founder of EquiLabs, which is a global digital rights laboratory advancing the intersectional feminist approaches to AI and data governance. You are also a UN-appointed young leader for the SDGs, a rising star on a political government's AI 100, and you've led work and research on ethical AI and data policy with institutions including the OECD, the United Nations, LSE. The list goes on. OK. But let's switch things up. Okay, usually I ask you a question. Let's break the rules here a little bit, because you want to ask our audience a question. Go
Definitely. Thank you so much, Kristen. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all wide awake. I know it's a little bit hard, but I promise the topic is fascinating. At least it is for me. I wanted to ask you a question, and I'm sorry if this is not so clear, the mic, but we can all make an effort. I wanted to do a little exercise with you. I want you all to imagine a government that decides what political content all of its citizens can access. It bans anything it disagrees with, and if you try to appeal, there's really no court to turn to, because that government moved its headquarters to different countries to avoid your country's laws. So picture that scene, right? You cannot have access to the political content you want to, or even if you try to, there's really no way to get it. If you think that would be an authoritarian government, I want you to raise your hand. OK, that's nearly 80–90% of the room. The difference here is that that's not a government. That's how some of the world's most powerful tech companies operate today. They control what we see, they silence what they don't like, and they stay out of reach of laws because there's really no one to turn them accountable. And we call that innovation. Is that right? Food for thought.
Food for thought, indeed. We call it innovation. I'd call that a coup. I call that a tech coup, and in fact, that's very much, I think, what is going on here today. As we just heard from Cecilia, that is indeed their business model, and that's how these organizations are thriving. And yet, when we put that into, as you so very well did, a political government context, no one would really be up for that. Now, how then, can you tell us a little bit more about how is big tech benefiting from this AI-fueled disinformation, and why is it not being regulated in the way that we would seek to regulate sort of a government or a political party out there?
I think we need to stop treating AI-fueled disinformation as sort of this necessary byproduct of innovation. That's really not necessary. I think as Cecilia, as Christophe, as we've heard before, with Toni as well, that type of disinformation is sort of a defining feature of our digital economy, or better, our attention economy. Platforms like X, Meta, Google, they all know that this is happening, but they thrive on the engagement that it gets them. Especially when it comes to synthetic disinformation, so that disinformation that is created and generated by artificial intelligence, that has become so valuable, and we don't realize it. It's fast, it's cheap, it's scalable, and what before would need some sort of Hollywood production now can be made just with a couple of clicks. And that is what generates engagement, because people that come across this information, they feel things. They feel rage, they feel fear, they feel hopeful, and all of that makes them stay online longer. What that happens is that generates more ad revenue, which I think we all have heard a little bit, and that just makes those companies thrive. So I think that we need to start seeing this information as sort of this product that has been sold to us, except that we didn't choose to buy it. And actually, we're not even the consumers, we're the product ourselves, because we're all mixed in this sort of disinformation bubble, right? So I know that a lot of people have asked, okay, don't we have laws to counter this? Who allowed that happen? We're not, or at least most of us might not be living in authoritarian governments, right? So why don't we have regulation that sort of stops that from happening, that changes this, this business model? And the answer is a little bit more complicated. Because yes, in some countries, in some areas of the world, we do have laws. Here in France, the EU have a lot of, or a few laws to counter disinformation. One of them, the Digital Services Act. So it's something that you might have heard in the media or on your social media. And it's sort of this law made by the EU to counter disinformation and to hold tech platforms accountable for the content that they impersonate. The difference here is in the enforcement side. So last year, X, Twitter, has been charged with spreading disinformation on the basis of this Digital Services Act. And what happened is that it let a lot of malicious actors act like verified sources and share disinformation, which has caused, as you can all imagine or you might have heard, a lot of trouble to people's understanding of reality, and it has been getting much harder to define what's truth and what's fake. The issue is that even though it was charged, it kept appealing, it kept giving more information, and that has been over a year ago and nothing really has happened. So yes, we do have laws, but the enforcement hasn't really caught up with that, right?
Well, it's starting. It's definitely not there yet. We have the laws, we have some of the frameworks, but I agree with you that enforcement is one of the things that needs to happen in order for them to actually have the teeth as such and to be able to protect us. There's a lot of talking about sort of like teeth and being fed things and a free lunch here, but what I'm hearing from you is that we're effectively being trained to be spoon-fed this kind of information.
Of course, and I think there's even another issue that comes with this type of reality is that it's this concept that also what is true has been targeted as AI generated, as fake. So something happens, a politician says something, or a company does something, and then they all go, oh no, that's AI, even though it's not.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, what is AI and what is not? Because even truth has been turned into generated, right?
Used against us. But I want to come back to this kind of almost like feeding metaphor that we're on now, because I know that part of your work is also in combating disinformation, is working and advocating with youth and trying to get youth inclusion in there, into this digital policy making, into some of the rules and regulations out there, because we see that youth are being spoon-fed this from day one now as such. Can you tell us about the work that you're doing there and why you're doing this work?
Definitely. I think we just talked, right, about how AI-fueled disinformation has been harming democracies and harming people's beliefs. But the reality is that young people already know this, because we've been spoon-fed this from a very early age. In fact, there is this research that came out recently that says that nearly half of the US teenagers don't really trust tech companies to curb AI-generated disinformation. So, and I would argue that this is much larger in global South countries where regulation really hasn't caught up and where people are really exposed to these threats. So young people really understand the harms of it, but at the same time, we're in the eye of the storm. We're really under the most pressure. We're the most data-fied generation ever. We're the most manipulated generation ever. And there's this really recent stat that came up recently that is actually that young people are less likely to be able to see what is disinformation and what is not. So actually an older person, an elder, is more likely to catch disinformation than someone from the Gen Z. And I think that this is really counterintuitive because we're like, oh, we're digital natives, we know this already, but actually no, we are test subjects. And this is why I've been advocating for more youth inclusion in policymaking, more youth inclusion in decision-making spaces, because we know what it's like, we know what it takes to curb this, except that we're not really getting the traction that we need. I have a digital rights lab, a youth-led digital rights lab called EquiLabs, and what we've been doing is that we've been writing research, writing policy papers. We've been acting on international fora, really to get our voices out there and show decision makers that we know what it takes. We just need to be heard, and we need resources coming to our organizations. We need to be in decision-making positions, but that takes a whole society to do it, right? But it's so important.
Definitely, and I want to riff on inclusion, actually, because yesterday we were talking about inclusion in AI development and how important that was. But when it comes to disinformation, one of the interesting and terrifying things we see here, in fact, is that AI is being used to actually target marginalized groups out there for specific disinformation, okay? Can you tell us about some of the examples you've seen here and the work you're doing to raise awareness of this issue?
Definitely. I think that when we talk about AI-generated disinformation, this is not affecting everyone equally. It's targeting marginalized communities, those who are already at the margins in society, and really changing and personalizing manipulation towards these people or against these people, right? So there are some examples which have been taken over the media in the past few years, and this is of deepfakes targeting women politicians. We know AOC in the US, Jacinda Ardern. We know other politicians in Latin America. They have been sexualized, they have been humiliated, and all of this through deepfakes. So there is also an issue here that is not just societal at large, but we also see some dynamics reproduced in these spaces. So sexism, homophobia, transphobia, this doesn't disappear when it comes to all of these issues. They just transform. They get more accurate, they get smarter, but actually they're not really helping anyone, or if they are, it's so minimal that it doesn't counter all of the bad side of it. So I think that when we think about what has been happening right now, I would love to say, oh, we've been advancing, we're developing more safeguards, but actually, I feel like we're coming back. Recently, just this year, Meta rolled back its fact-checking program, and this really got all over the news about how Meta is taking away some of its safeguards to the most minoritized populations. And just a few days after this decision, some really weird things started happening on Instagram. For example, posts saying that women were born to be sexual slaves were on, or that LGBT people were mentally ill. And all of this has an actual impact beyond the screens. It impacts our policies, it impacts our lives. So I think that when we talk about this, the cost of this disinformation divide, it doesn't go to everyone equally. And again, through my work at EquiLabs and these spaces, we really try to bring this sort of perspective. That's why we say we're an we're intersectional feminist lab, because we do think that bringing more intersectional perspectives to technology really helps us all.
So I want to come to that in the few minutes we have left, and you've been talking just about sort of this imbalances that we see out there. I want to talk about power imbalances. Toni started us off talking about sort of like the power out there. In a recent podcast interview with Joe Rogan, Mark Zuckerberg called for more masculine energy, okay? You, however, Luísa, you're advocating for feminist AI governance, okay, as a counterbalance and to help us in the erosion of our democracy. What is this? What is feminist AI governance, and how does it support and strengthen our democratic systems and our values?
Yeah, I saw this statement by Zuckerberg, and I think that this really contributes to what we call the manosphere happening today in the tech world, which is most tech companies are governed by men. And I think that the answer to this is feminist AI. And here, I want us to really drop all of our preconceptions. I know feminist is a word that people may not be comfortable with, but here I use this word feminist to rethink power imbalances. Because for me, what's at stake when it comes to AI and disinformation is a power imbalance. And if we want to shift this, we need to restructure systems of power. We need to redistribute power to different parts of society. And for me, this is what feminism embeds. It's really by getting that intersectionality, so really including people beyond just the white man, not because the white man doesn't have its place, but it shouldn't have all of the places. It should be everyone. And I think that for me, this is really what feminist AI embeds. And we see right now that in order to get the truth out, we need to rethink the types of systems that this truth has been built on. And for me, feminist AI is a democratic project. It's a project that really brings everyone to the table. Because if we're talking about AI and democracy, we really need all voices out there, all voices making change, having a say in what's decided and what's not. And really, for me, that's what feminist AI is like. It's just not just ask, oh, how to fix this tool, but really ask, who built this tool in the first place, and why are we using it? And I think it's a little bit what Cecilia said in her speech, is like, why are we subjecting to these types of technology when we could have alternatives? But these alternatives don't just come out of spite. We need policies that really advance them. We need companies willing to take the risk. And we need people engaged. We need everyone engaged. So for me, really, feminist AI and democracy are really, really one thing. And I think that it's really not just a strategy, it's more like a survival pathway to democracy. And that's the future I'm fighting for, and I really hope that everyone does too.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope through this session we've heard from some amazing speakers here. If I can just condense some of these things to talk about this power imbalance that we've just been addressing. And in fact, Toni started us off by talking about the power. Christophe and Cecilia also, whether we were talking about economic power or our own agency with critical thinking. And now continuing on with that with you, Luísa, it's thinking for us about how can we reclaim some of that power? How can we bring some of that back to help us in this battle against disinformation today? Thank you very much, Luísa. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.